thank you very much to her family. So I'm going to introduce Rabbi Jacob Staub. I do have a little bit of an official bio that I'm going to read from. I hope that's okay, Rabbi Jacob. Rabbi Jacob Staub, PhD, graduated from the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College in 1977. Rabbi Jacob has served on the Rabbinical College faculty since 1983. He served as the college's vice president for academic affairs and as academic dean from 1989 to 2004. He was instrumental in developing the Rabbinical School's spiritual direction program, has taught Jewish spiritual direction across North America, including at Spiritual Directors International and the Spirituality Institute of Metivta. He co-directs the Bechol Levavcha, a training program for Jewish spiritual directors at Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion in New York. He has served as a faculty member and board member at Nihirim, LGBT Jewish Culture and Spirituality. Rabbi Jacob earned a Bachelor of Arts in English at the State University of New York at Buffalo and a Master of Arts and Doctorate in Religion from Temple University, where he specialized in medieval Jewish philosophy. He trained as a spiritual director at the Shalem Institute for Spiritual Formation. He completed certification in mindfulness leadership training with Sylvia Boorstein and teaches meditation and contemplative practice at the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College. Rabbi Jacob served as the editor of the Reconstructionist Journal from 1983 to 1989. He is the author of The Creation of the World According to Gersonides in 1982, also a guide to Jewish practice focused on Shabbat in 2013. He edited the Zeke issue on Reconstructionism, Denominationalism That Works in 2010. He is the co-editor with someone who's very familiar to us as well, Rabbi Jeffrey Schein, of Creative Jewish Education, A Reconstructionist Perspective in 1985. And he is the co-author with Rabbi Rebecca T. Alpert of Exploring Judaism, A Reconstructionist Approach. This is a book that is a very important book in our community. We just finished a 4-week mini course on an introduction to Reconstructionism. We had about 25 people in that course, and people always love reading that book, Rabbi Jacob. So today at the Rabbinical School, Rabbi Jacob is a professor of Jewish philosophy and spirituality. He is the director of the Jewish Spiritual Direction program at the college, and also the director of Evolve, Groundbreaking Conversations, which we may learn a little bit more about this weekend. And he is also the Sadie Gottesman and Arlene Gottesman Ref, Professor of Gender and Judaism at the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College. So lastly, I just want to, on a personal note, and then I will turn things over to Rabbi Jacob. I am honored to count Rabbi Jacob Staub as a teacher, a mentor, and a treasured colleague, going all the way back to my years as a rabbinical student at the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College. And I'm so delighted that many of our membership are getting to meet and learn from him this weekend. He's been a role model for me as a seeker, as a scholar, and in his thoroughgoing menschlichkeit all these many years. There is an additional level of delight that one of HaLev's own young adults who grew up within our community, Rachel Davidson, who is the daughter of our HaLev members, Mark and Adina, who are with us this evening, and also the granddaughter of HaLev members, Anna Kelman and the late Sam Kelman of blessed memory. And Rachel will soon complete her own 5 years of rabbinical training at the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College and be ordained as a rabbi. And she feels exactly the same way about Rabbi Jacob as I do, and she expressed that in a recent quote. She was asked by Lila to share a thought about Rabbi Jacob, and Rachel said, "Rabbi Jacob Staub is one of my favorite teachers, favorite professors, and a wonderful teacher." So we are all in for a treat to get to study with Rabbi Jacob this weekend, this Shabbat, and I am sure we will all be in Rabbi Jacob's camp by the end of this weekend. And Rabbi Jacob, I now turn things over to you for our first session for this Scholar in Residence weekend. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Having an introduction like that sometimes is intimidating. How can I live up to it? But I'll do my best. Thank you, Rabbi Steve. It is a great pleasure for me to be here. I feel very close to your rabbi. We continue to spend meaningful time together, if only by Zoom. And I guess I haven't been to HaLev since before you, Steve, arrived. You were a fledgling institution with Rabbi Shine. We were visiting. So it feels like, even though I'm not in Cleveland, and even though I don't know most of you, there's a way in which this is home, and I'm very glad to be here. I understand the title, the topic of discussion today, Reconstructing Faith in the 21st Century, in a particular way. I hope it's not too far off. We've been through quite a year, and my Orthodox sisters and brother-in-law know what faith is through a trying time like this. They know that praying to Hashem is effective, and you just have to keep praying for God's protection, and with a certainty that God hears and that God has a good deal of influence over what happens to us. And for those of us who don't have that kind of faith in a supernatural God who intervenes in human affairs, it may seem difficult to talk about faith. What does it mean to have faith during a pandemic? What does it mean to have faith during racial injustice, unrest, in the face of our climate crisis? If we're not expecting divine intervention, what then can that word mean? And I hope to offer a few thoughts that might be helpful to you this evening about what it might mean. What is emunah? What is faith? It's not what traditionally is sung about, ani ma'amin ba'emunah shlema b'viyat HaMashiach. I believe with a perfect faith in the coming of the Messiah. It's not mipnei chata'enu galinu me'artzenu. It's not what we say in the Amid, we don't, but in other Sidurim, the Amidah, because of our sins, we were exiled from our land. We are rewarded and punished depending on our behavior. That's not, we don't believe in that kind of faith. And so then the question is also, what do we mean by tikvah? What do we mean by hope? So first of all, I want to, having set up that traditional faith, I want to disabuse us that that is not the traditional faith. It's better than that. It's more accessible than that. And I'll give you two examples historically. The first from the 12th century, from Maimonides, the great medieval scholar and rabbi from Muslim Spain and then Egypt, who teaches very explicitly that God is beyond conception, that all descriptions of God are inaccurate, are false, because God is just beyond our experience and our ability to know. All that we can know about God, Maimonides says, is what we can infer from nature, from creation, from the way this world works. And that doesn't really tell us anything about God and God's self. And that though things work by natural law, everything that happens to an individual is by chance, Maimonides teaches. We have some influence. If we wear a mask, it changes the odds of us catching a virus, but it doesn't, but I'm sure you know people like I know people who abided by all the health advisories and have caught COVID, unfortunately, and have suffered, and some have died, not because they weren't doing the right thing. So he does say the more we live in alignment with the laws of nature, the percentages might improve for us doing better, but lightning strikes are random, and we do not have control over the diseases that we get or the natural disasters to which we are subject. That's not what faith means to him. He says quite explicitly, someone who is wealthy, someone who is healthy, someone who is successful, there is no correlation between that person's success and that person's piety or righteousness. It just doesn't work like that. And I kind of agree. I think that's right. He says the only reward for living a godly life is the joy of being close to God, the meaning and enlightenment and clarity that occurs when we see things from a divine God's eye viewpoint and understand the unity of all things and the meaning, and all things are meaningful. That's an internal reward. It's not like anything happens to us on the outside that correlates with what we're doing. Second example, from a 20th century Hasidic rabbi, Shmuel Noach Borozovsky, in his book Netivot Shalom, The Pathways of Peace, teaches very clearly that faith and prayer do not lead to divine intervention. We can't know why we are mortal, why things happen to us, why everything changes, why bad things happen to good people. Rather, the only thing that is clearly answered in our prayers, and he does believe that prayers are answered, is internal transformation. If I pray that I want to be more forgiving, that in itself is causative, causes me to become more forgiving or more generous, or more honest, or more faithful, more loving. Not just praying for it, but actually having the right kavanah and doing the right practices. That leads to transformation. Prayer is effective, but it's effective in changing us and our behavior, not in causing any kind of reward or punishment supernaturally. So this is someone who died in the year 2000, who was the Rabbi of a large sect, the Slonomer Hasidim. That's what he teaches. So across a wide swath of Jewish belief, from rational to Hasidic to mystical, people aren't really, haven't really been teaching a direct correlation. So faith does not mean what we sometimes attribute to people who believe in an active God. So what I'm going to now suggest and offer is a number of ways that we might be interested in cultivating faith that is not that are internally transformative and effective and real, and that will have an effect. That can have an effect. Everybody is different. There are different spiritual types. Not everybody is going to warm to each one of these suggestions or to any of them. But here are a few ways that we can cultivate our faith. The first one is a cultivation of faith in human interaction and in mutual support and of loving behavior. I like to tell the story of my meeting with my own spiritual director in the middle of a really awful, lengthy divorce that I was going through. And I came to her one month and said, Susan, I don't know what to do. I just can't figure out what is it that I should do. There's a hearing next week, and I'm just at a loss. I'm afraid that everything is falling apart. And she listened and listened, and she said in her terms, Jacob, you have to give it to God. And she said it 3 times, and I didn't understand the first 2 times, and the third time I said, Susan, I understand what give means, and it, and to, and God, but what does give it to God mean? I have not the slightest idea. And she apologized. And she said, oh, ask for help. And I said, I can't ask for help. She said, why not? I said, because I don't believe in a God who hears my prayers and my requests and offers help. So that would be disingenuous. And she said, just try it. And I said, no, I can't. And we went on back and forth for a while. Finally, I came to being able to say, I need help. I can't do this alone. And as if it were supernatural, as if my prayer was answered, everything transformed in a matter of seconds. When I didn't feel isolated, and I was tapping into all the people who loved me and all the supports I had, and a faith in the world, and that I was not going to have to solve all of my problems alone. It really changed not only the way I saw things, but the way things were, really. So this is a faith, I'm suggesting, in connection, a faith in the power of relationship, and the power of love, and the power of helping each other. And I want to suggest that this is the nature of reality. This is not Pollyannish. I don't know if any of you have read The Hidden Life of Trees or similar books. Groves of trees, the root systems are completely interactive. And when one tree is sick and dying, the others send over the nutrients and what it needs to recover. I won't give you many more examples, but this is true on every scientifically observable among plants, among different species of animals. The world is built on a cooperative basis. You perhaps have read more recent stuff that says evolution is not the survival of the fittest, where the fittest are more powerful, more dominant. The fittest turns out to be the most cooperative. Those species and parts of species that help each other, that work together, that are interactive, are the ones that have the best chance of survival and flourishing. So being open to help. The one reading that I suggested you might want to read, and I still do, is from the website Evolve by Rabbi Alex Weissman. Um, and God is in a space between us, right? And he suggests, and he gives his own examples in his own memoir, this account that when I can help you, but when I can let you help me, and I can take your loving advice, that is a moment of godliness, of faith. And this is, I think, a transformation. It's a drash, an advance over predicate theology that Rabbi Harold Schulweis suggested many decades ago. God, it's not what is God, but when is God, and God is when I am generous. God is when I am honest. Um, this is an expansion of that. God is when I can ask for help. God is when I can cry out. God is when I can admit that I need help. God is, because otherwise, God, in quoting the predicate theology, God is only when I'm on the top of my game, and when I'm really in need, God isn't there. So there's a way in which receptiveness, ability to be open to the offerings of one another, is a way we can have faith in that, and faith that that is a way of coping and surviving and flourishing in our lives. Next, I want to talk a little bit about Rahmanut, about compassion. About compassion, about self-compassion, and about compassion for others. 20 or a little bit more years ago, when someone suggested that I should have self-compassion, I thought they were suggesting that I be weak, that I not take responsibility, that I, shouldn't be compassionate to yourself. You should take responsibility and do what you're supposed to do. That's the way I was raised. That is very much in the ethos of the society and the culture in which we live. Um, and it's about individualism and about individual responsibility and accountability. But a more compassionate viewpoint is based on the premise that we are human, that we are not perfect, we are imperfect, we are flawed, we make mistakes, we are not always strong, we are not always clear eyed, we are not always acting lovingly. And that's why I think why the rabbis drash made in the midrash suggests that teshuva was created before the world was created, because without teshuva, without the ability to change and return and improve, and without that, the world could not stand, because nothing in the world is perfect. Nothing is flawless. Certainly not people, not other creatures, not the weather. There's nothing about the world in which we live that we can talk of as impeccable, as beyond reproach, beyond improvement. Um, we we need to we need tshuva. We need constant tshuva, because we make mistakes. We hurt each other. We really can do damage. We can inflict pain. We can be indifferent, ignoring people, or averting our eyes when they need our help. And that's okay. It's okay. We need to have self compassion I am doing the best that I can. If I could do better, I would do better, but I am doing the best I can. And if I didn't get sleep last night and I'm really quick tempered, if I'm hungry or my sugar is getting too low, um, I will act in ways that I wish I hadn't. Um, and there is a promise in that midrash of tshuva. There's a promise that we are held in our imperfection. Um, God is called Harachaman, the compassionate one. That the thing we can take from one thing that we can take from our traditional inheritance on these matters, whether or not we think God is aware or God intervenes, but rather, in any case, we have second chances, we have third chances. We are not immutable. We change, we grow, we mature. We reach a new stage of life where we understand things that we didn't understand before. And we need to forgive ourselves and not hold ourselves up to a standard that you will then hold others up to. If I can be self-compassionate, I can be compassionate to others. If I can't be self-compassionate, I'm liable to be very much of a hard on other people. In the front of many synagogues, it says, "Da lifnei mi ata omed," know before whom you stand. And I think this is often misinterpreted. You know, when I was a child, it meant don't fool around, or speak during the service. Don't misbehave. And it also meant that I had to get dressed up in nice clothes in order to go to synagogue, right? Because I was going before God, right? And so there's an implicit assumption that is not authentic to our tradition, that only if I'm dressed up, only if I'm good, only if I'm not sinful can I stand before God. And that is not the heritage, the teaching of the heritage that I think we want to preserve. We do a lot of breastfeeding, or some of us do. Everybody I know does. And there's a custom in some circles now that when you say al chet, you don't pound your breast, but you caress your breast, you caress your heart. Oh, poor Jacob. He keeps screwing up. Oh, Jacob. And that is, we can have a faith in a God or godliness that is supportive and understanding and compassionate. So, do you have to believe in God in order to have faith? I hope so far that you've seen that that's not the case. I think you certainly don't have to believe in a supernatural God who hears what you're praying and sees what you're doing. But you might find it useful to have a faith in another image of God, right? So, as I mentioned a couple of moments ago, you might find God in the space between us and in the way in which we interact. What do I mean by God there? Something transcendent, something immeasurable, something mysterious, something that cannot be measured in a laboratory, some founding principle of the way this world works. And it can be the root systems of those trees, manifest in the root systems of those trees. It can be um, a belief that it's good to be loving, it's good to be generous, it's good to be open-hearted, and when I am that way, I feel connected not only to you, but to potentially the universe, to all things. I can say, Adonai Echad. I can experience the oneness, the unity, the interactiveness of the entire cosmos. Or you might gravitate to a more process theology orientation. Um, don't worry, I won't get too wonky here, although I could do that in another talk. Um, Process theologians, and there's some evidence that Kaplan was influenced by them, believe that everything is changing. The only constant is change. Everything continues to transform and evolve and interact. So what I do now is the product of everything that has happened before me, back to the Big Bang. And what I do now affects you, affects the future. I'm changing, you are changing me, I am changing you. There is the constant is ongoing process. And that God also is perpetually changing, that God is perpetually affected by all the things that we do. God is not in charge. God is a process. God is that which moves me to want to be generous, that moves me to be honest, moves me to be loving. And if I choose not to, I can do damage, and that's not God doing it. God is luring me. God is offering me that, but I don't have to accept it. I got to tell you that to a person, and I shouldn't probably not be revealing the personal theologies of people you know, but to my surprise, everyone in this year's graduating class is really into process theology. It really seems to work with the way that science is understood, and as a motivator, as a reinforcer of justice work activism. We can change things. The world is so constructed that we can align and change things. Or you can think of God as not God, or not as a traditional God, God as the mysterious ground of being beyond conception. And the key is that there is more than can be measured in a laboratory, more than materiality, something that we can't even put our finger on, but we have a sense, that we have a faith that there's something to life, something to reality that is worth aligning with. In all cases, my faith, one's faith, I want to suggest, is that whatever happens to me, I will be able to find support, and I will make it through. Right? I will find the resources to cope with whatever happens. I think our basic fear is that we're not going to be able to handle it. And to use the closest example at hand, in the darkest days of the pandemic, I don't have faith that I'm not going to get sick and die. I don't have faith that people I care about are not going to be adversely affected and they maybe die. My faith is that if I get sick, I will manage it. I will die a good death. If I lose someone who's close to me, it will hurt. It will take a very long time to mourn and heal, but it is something that is within my ability to cope with and to get support for. It's what I experienced when my daughter died 10 years ago. It was unimaginably difficult. Um, and I had a community that was supporting me, and the pain was immeasurable. Um, and I wasn't able to feel my faith for a year or more, but I knew because of previous work that I had done, I knew that healing occurs, that wounds become scars, and one adapts. You never get back to where you were before. You don't want to get back to where you were before, but you can meet adversity, uh, and you can have faith in that. And if you have uh, a belief that there are such forces that help us, um, that is one of the things that I would call faith. Um, this is returning to the idea of compassion and imperfection. I do the best I can, but I am not in control. I always go back to the illusion of control because it's so much easier to think I have control, but I don't. I don't have control. And when I think I do, I end up feeling guilty for a whole lot of things that I thought I could control. Um, if only I had done X, maybe they would not have done Y, right? As if I had the option of acting perfectly, as if there is a way to control what other people do, a way uh, to manipulate reality. I do not know how long I'm going to live. I do not know how healthy I will be for how long. I would even, the slight aside, my husband um, suffered 2 strokes in the last 12 months. In fact, first one was around Pesach. So we're heading on a year. And at first I was saying, oh, well, I believe that his rehabilitation is going to restore him to the health that he had before. And then after the second stroke in the fall, I was thinking, I'm not going to hold on to that false hope. I'm going to accept the way he is now. He's improved somewhat, but I'm not expecting him to get any better. I'm fine with the way he is now. And it took me a while to realize that that was also grasping at control. I wanted a non-moving target. I didn't want to think about how much he was going to be rehabilitated. I could handle things being as they are, and I wanted to control that. And it's very hard not to, I think. Um, as much, and I do a lot of practicing of not not assuming that I'm control, and yet I'm always reverting to it when I'm not looking. When I let my concentration down. Um, my faith, in this sense, is that even though I can't determine outcomes and I don't know what's going to happen to me or to the members of my family, or to the earth, um, right? To large or small, I don't have control. Um, Even though I can't determine outcomes, I will adapt and do the best that I can. You may know the line in Psalm 145 or the morning blessings, Ashrei, that says, Someach noflim, God supports those who fall. And it's my understanding that when you step out and take risks and stumble and fall, that is when you get the most support. When I stay still and try not to lose my balance and not to do difficult things, I feel less support, not as much as when I'm facing the fact that I don't know what's going to happen and I move forward anyway. Finally, tikva, hope. There are two different kinds of hope, at least two different kinds of hope. So how do we have hope in a world of pandemics, and they tell us this isn't going to be the last one, in a world of racial unrest, in a world of global catastrophe? Hope is not that everything will be all right. I can't believe that. My hope is my vision for what I hope will happen. I hope that we will wake up and energize ourselves and marshal our resources all together and effect a change in greenhouse gases and affecting a way to mitigate the effects of climate chaos. And that's not a hope where I'm sitting back and hoping that it happens to someone else. It's a hope that activates me to work towards that hope. That's the kind of hope that I try to cultivate. What do I envision? What do I want? Who can I work with? How can I activate things to happen or contribute, if it's already going on, contribute to a process in which things can change? This is, looks like I'm going to be ending. I'm looking at the time on a very down note, but I'll risk it, right? There is a chance, a not marginal chance, a fairly good chance that we are facing the sixth mass extinction of species in this country. We're losing species day by day, and we might really be facing catastrophic loss of human life as well. And it may happen. And it doesn't help me to hope that it won't happen. It helps, I think, to believe that together, linking arms and combining resources, that we can make a difference and effect change to mitigate that possibility, so that even though things are already going, being different, even though there's already damage and there will be more damage, it won't be as bad as it might have been. That's the kind of active hope. That's the kind of active hope that I think we're taught by our traditions. God makes the wheat and we make the bread. You know, God provides us with opportunities, and it's up to us to take advantage of those opportunities and be in partnership with the divine. We do not have all the power, human beings. But we do not have no power. We do not lack power altogether. We are in a position where we can make a difference if we can envision what it is we are hoping for. And we are in a position to have faith that whatever happens, whether it's what we want or not, whether it's what we anticipate or not, we are more resilient, we are uh, sturdier than we fear. And tomorrow, I'm going to talk a little bit about practices for cultivating resilience. So it's not something that we just happens. One can work to become more generous and more loving and more open. It is work that we can do, and we can have faith that it will be worth doing. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Jacob, for lots of grist for our collective mill to think about. And we have some time for some questions. And I also recognize that there was a wide range of reflections and ideas, and we could just maybe sit for a couple of moments here and let those settle, and then if people would like to ask Rabbi Jacob something, or comment on how something that he said touched you, or made you think in a different way, we can do that. So I'm going to try to monitor. And if I will say, and I appreciate Leah Kamienkowski raising her electronic hand, and that is, if people do raise, if you would be willing to click on the participants button, that will give you, and actually depending on which Zoom version you have, you might even have it in the reactions, or then the reactions section. It gives you the option to raise your hand. If you do that, I think it will bring your name to the top of the participants list, which will make it really easy. Okay, great. I got a bunch of hands. So I'm going to go in the order. I saw Leah, and I saw Alan, I think, raised your hand. And Barb, did you have your hand up too? Barb Truitt, I wasn't. Okay, so let's start with Leah and then Alan. Go ahead, Leah.
Jacob, it's wonderful to have you here with us.
Thank you.
And thank you for the wisdom that you shared. I think I got a lot out of it. I am sure that other people did too. But what I wanted to talk to you about is, you mentioned in passing predicate Judaism, predicate theology, I'm sorry. I think that more than 20 years ago, I read your article on predicate theology. I think it was Reconstructionism Today. And it made a big impact on me at the time, and still does. And I wanted to ask you if you would say a few words about predicate theology.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for that question. So this was a proposal, a theory, a method put forth by Rabbi Harold Schulweis, who was a direct student of Rabbi Mordechai Kaplan. And Rabbi Schulweis taught that, as with Maimonides, we don't know what God is. We don't know if God is a subject of any at all. What we know is when God is. So when I sit with you and listen to you and empathize with you, God is in that moment. When I act courageously, when I stick my neck out and fight for what I think is right, God is in that moment. So God is when human beings connect in these two examples. God is when I am moved to fight for justice. I don't know what God is, but I know when God's presence is manifest. can be felt. So the point I was making in expanding that notion was all of Schulweiss's predicates are active. God is when I'm generous. God is when I act lovingly. God is when I am industrious, whatever. And when I lived by that for a while, I realized there's no God is when I'm feeling despair, or when I'm feeling lonely, or I am feeling, or when I'm mourning. Um, and so I have been suggesting that in addition to finding God when I am actively helping you, God is also when you are helping me and I am open to your help. God is when I let my defenses down and admit that I need help, when I cry out for help. God is when I am in pain. God is when I am sick and I, as I was just speaking about, and I am marshaling my own resolve and strength to come to terms with my illness, for example. God is not only in the high points, but God is in the low points if we can be open to connection and to feeling the support that is there. But the main point about predicate theology is we can know what God, quote unquote, does as when God is manifest, but we can't, it is beyond our ability to know what God is. That help?
That, Leah, is it okay? That is,
Yes,
okay.
yes.
Okay. All right. All right. Thank you. Yeah.
What I would like to add is what I was so impressed with in that article is when you put God in the predicate, when you said justice is godly, compassion is godly, rather than God is just or God is compassionate.
Right.
And
Maybe it's clearer back
it
then.
helped me clear my own
Mhm.
thinking at the time. Thank you.
That's wonderful.
Thank you, Leah. Alan, go ahead and ask. Yeah.
Yeah, well, first, before I ask, I wanted just to say that how much I appreciated what you had to say in your descriptions of a number of aspects that feel to me like they're a kind of like a mature form of religion, as opposed to the childlike belief in a God that we pray to and helps us and talks to us and we talk to him and that sort of thing. So my question, and this is just occurred to me as we're doing that, this will sound terrible, but I was thinking, when I look at the prayers, when I think of the prayers that we do in services, they seem a lot to be oriented towards that first form of God, not the kind of God that you're describing. And so I just wondered if there's been an evolution, or there's some thoughts about evolving the prayers from the more traditional ones that we have to something that more fits more with what you're saying.
Sure, that's an excellent question. There is, first of all, a real tension, I think, between the value of retaining traditional language because it has the power, the karmic energy of hundreds of generations, and nostalgically, it's what we might have, what we might remember with our parents and grandparents. And the Hebrew is, it's just powerful, I certainly feel it when, we were singing Lecha Dodi, at the beginning of the service. And on the other hand, praying what we mean, right? Instead of praying. So the compromise that Reconstructionists have tried to effect in the past has been, let's keep everything that we can interpret into, I'll use your term, the mature form, right? Some things just don't work. Resurrection of the dead, chosenness, God, we are chosen and nobody else is chosen. Various things said about non-Jews or women, or we have to excise them or change them. But what happens is, like I said, for people who are prayers, who do a lot of praying, when I say God supports those who fall, I'm not thinking of God as reaching out and picking me up. I'm thinking about the support that I feel when I venture forth and stumble. And God is Rofei Cholim. God heals the sick. I'm not thinking literally that God is sending cures, but that there is healing in the world. And actually, in the 1950-something holiday prayer book of the Reconstructionist movement, there was actually a Mishaberach, a healing prayer. That was a prayer, please give the doctors wisdom in treating so-and-so for their illness. There's something that gets lost in that kind of translation. There is a lot of poetry and mythic power in the liturgy. So there is there are reasons not to change it too much. Now, the poet Marcia Falk, in her Book of Blessings, gets rid of all the Baruch Atah Adonais, blessed are you, God, who does this, who does that, and says, Nivarech, we bless the wine, we bless the bread, taking it out of, and some of us thought in the 1980s, 1990s that would create a wave and we would start saying that. It hasn't yet happened. And I'm not sure if it will or whether it should. Better accepted in some circles is silence, or is nigunim, right? I sit and pray wordlessly. I sit and get transported by singing or chanting some Hebrew words that I can infuse with my own interpretation, my own naturalistic but inspiring interpretation. And there's lots of experimentation going on. If you really want it changed, you go to the humanistic Siddur. Detroit is near Cleveland, isn't it? And I just know that Rocky Colavito was traded for Harvey Keene, and I never knew which was Cleveland and which was Detroit. And so you want to take God out of the Siddur. People have done it. It doesn't quite meet my needs. It might meet yours, or might meet some people. So the question is a good question. We have to keep asking it. We have to keep checking in with ourselves about what works as a method for transporting ourselves beyond ourselves to a prayerful state. But there's no easy answers, I guess, the bottom line, I would say.
Thank you. Thanks, Rabbi Jacob. Thank you, Alan. I am looking for other hands that may be raised. We still have a few minutes before we reach our formal concluding time. Let's see. Oh yes, Rob Pliskin, please. And then Adina Davidson.
How do I make that go away?
You're good. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Rabbi Jacob. Well, what you just reflected on with Alan reminded me of being on a Hashomer Hatzair kibbutz in the 1970s, no, the 80s. And it was still a part of the secular socialist movement, kibbutz movement at that time. And yet they still had Friday night, there was a dinner, and it was a Erev Shabbat dinner. And before that, there was anybody that wanted to could come into a group that would meet. I can't remember exactly where it was. And there would be a kind of an order of service. It would not mention God. It would not use the word blessing. Candles were lit. Bread was passed, and songs were sung. A song was sung to the land. A statement. There was some sort of a secular statement that I can't remember at the time because it made such little difference to me, right? It just felt like something was missing for me, but that doesn't mean that it was missing for the group that was there doing that. And it's what you were talking about just made me think of that. Whereas, this evening, doing the 3 prayers we did in song with the specific melodies that we did, is different in that way. It takes me someplace. It takes me maybe to that space that you're talking about, between you and me, or between me and everything else, and me and the everything. And so this is just a very it's a very good discussion for me, and I just wanted to let you know I appreciate it.
Thank you. There are wonderful collections of kibbutz liturgies and rituals. I'm not sure that whether they're translated yet, but there are scholars working on it. It's a really interesting phenomenon. And, lighting candles on Friday night has its own power. Whether you say Lahadlik Neir Shel Shabbat or not, you're still lighting the light, and you're doing what your grandparents did and what people around the world are doing. If the community wants to say, we light these lights because Shabbat, in the hope that Shabbat will bring us some wisdom and enlightenment, and there's a catchy tune to it, not catchy, but moving tune, sounds good to me. I think we absolutely should continue to support those who want to innovate as we are innovating and as Jewish civilization is evolving. The thing about a civilization is it's not linear, it's not conceptual. All of the symbols and the smells and the tastes and the subliminal associations are important for getting us into a state of connection with what is greater.
Thank you, Rob, for the comment, and thank you, Rabbi Jacob, for the reflection. We're going to go to Adina Davidson.
Now I'm going to see whether she looks like her daughter.
Oh,
So I have a kind of an academic question. So I'm doing this practice of reading one chapter of the Bible a day. It's an app on my phone. And we're kind of deep into Psalms right now. And in Psalms, it's very clear that the biblical point of view is good people get rewarded and bad people get punished in this world, right? Very concrete. And I'm wondering how Maimonides, without staying with it, how did he logically get from there to, nah, good people don't necessarily get rewarded, bad people don't necessarily get punished in this, you know, in this realm of existence? I'm just wondering, like, yeah.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm trying to figure out how to answer it briefly. So at the beginning of the Guide of the Perplexed, the first 50 chapters, which is half of the first of 3 books, right? So 1/6 of the Guide of the Perplexed, give or take, he is telling you what words in the Bible mean. Okay, so when it says God sees, it doesn't mean God sees. It means there's an awareness or something. He does not believe in a God who changes or who is aware of what's going on in the details of our lives. So he reinterprets all of it to accord with that, because this doesn't only apply to him, it applies to all Jewish interpretation until the 19th century. If you believe that the Torah is true, then it must agree with what you think is the truth, right? So if it doesn't, then you have to either reinterpret what the Torah is saying, or you need to reinterpret what science is telling you. Not like you can't have a two-truth theory. So what Maimonides did was it was a guide of the perplexed. All the people in his time were perplexed because the Bible and the Midrash were saying things that were absolutely impossible given the state of philosophy and astronomy and psychology and medicine in the 12th century. So it must be that we have been misinterpreting what the Torah says.
Got it.
Great. Thank you, Adina. Thank you, Rabbi Jacob. Maybe one more question before we, if no pressure, if no one has one, I just wanted to say there's probably time for one more question before we conclude. And again, it's easiest if people raise their hand electronically in terms of me being able to see.
Or you could unmute this last question to speak. If there's
Oh,
one.
that's true. People could just unmute if you have one and I'm not seeing you. That's a good point. Okay, Barb, go ahead.
right. I've been debating about asking this question because at once it's sort of frivolous. The Force in Star Wars, what kind of theology? Is that a process theology where you can tap into the Force for good or for evil?
Yeah. So I find Star Wars really inspiring. and because it is a kind of midrash on beliefs that I have, but having a doctorate in philosophy, I have to say it's more Neoplatonic philosophy than process theology. That is, so I can answer somewhat frivolously also, but there's a way in which a lot of people over the centuries have believed that God is like the sun, not literally, but God radiates a divine overflow, right? So things overflow from God, and it's your opportunity to receive that overflow, and you can then gain knowledge and wisdom and courage and strength without God doing anything. God just does what God always does. God overflows, kind of like a fountain. It just keeps going, or like the sun, and you receive it, and so now I'm tripping on Darth Vader, but let me. It's so wait, at least for the Rebel Alliance, right? At least for Luke Skywalker, for the good guys, if they can just open up and gain the strength that comes from letting the Force flow through you, that would be Neoplatonic, right? I don't think my little shiur here has the range to explain the empire, right? That's I mean the way that, because the film goes as it goes, but in general one would say that if one does not align, one can pervert and ruin things by rejecting the divine overflow and being totally self-concerned and selfish and greedy and power hungry. Then that's perfectly possible. It happens all the time. But God isn't doing it. You're rejecting that way.
Thank you.
My best shot.
Good. I love that we're ending on Star Wars. That's great. It often happens when we're in Recon 101 and we're talking about Kaplan's notion of the divine, and the word force often comes up, and always someone talks. Star Wars comes up every time. It's like, oh, when you say force, that I understand what that is. So I just want to okay. I just want to thank you, Rabbi Jacob, so much. Oh, wait, Glenda. Okay, you sure? Do you want to? Okay, well, maybe you can type it in the chat and we can find a way to squeeze it in. No. Okay. All right.
I'm impressed by how many little squares you can actually see.
Right. I know, it's like you mean just that you can get 25 on a sheet?
No, but that you can then see faces and you're talking to people.
Oh, I see. Well,
Yeah.
you know what? It's I get it's good to be able to see people. I get to see many of these people on a regular basis, so that's helpful to me. So thank you for really thought-provoking reflections this evening, Rabbi Jacob, and a great start to the weekend. And thank you to everybody who asked your questions, and really our group is never short on engagement and question and reflection, and I'm sure we're going to continue to do that throughout the weekend. I want to, in addition to thanking Rabbi Jacob, I would like to thank the people who, all the people involved in organizing this weekend. So Alan Fetterman and Lila Hanft and the entire Adult Education Committee. Thank you guys. And that includes Leah Kamiankowski and Dina Epstein and Barb Truitt and Maxine Brand and Audrey Warner. And the Religious Practices Committee is always involved in stuff that happens on Shabbat, and Connie Friedman is the chair of that. So thank you also to Religious Practices. Our Zoom hosts this evening were Barb Truitt and Alan Fetterman. Thank you guys for that. We will regather for, this won't be Rabbi Jacob's next presentation immediately, but tomorrow morning at 10:30, we will have Shabbat morning services. Rabbi Jacob will give a short Devar Torah during the Torah service tomorrow that will be a lead into his presentation on resilience and spiritual practice after Zoom, after our Zoom, a briefer Zoom Kiddush than we usually have. I did not remember to put this in my Friday email today, but it is Spring Forward weekend. So I just I'm going to be saying that every time we get together to remind people that on Saturday night, we're going to turn our clocks forward so that those of us who would like to be on time for the Sunday session at 10:30 will all get there at the same time. So Saturday night, we lose an hour of sleep, but we gain an hour of conscious sunlight later in the day. So hopefully that's a good trade-off for most people. And so with that, if there are no other burning announcements, I am going to say Shabbat Shalom and good Shabbos to everyone. Thank you for being here, and hope to see many of you, if not all of you, over the rest of the course of the weekend. Okay, thank you so much. Have a good rest of Erev Shabbat. Bye-bye.